How we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here, and welcome to the first of my Alpha Dragonflight profession overviews. Today we're going to take a little bit of a look at leatherworking. This is one that I went through in a huge amount of detail on stream the other day. And I wanted to try and break it down and hopefully keep this video to a reasonable length. I don't want these to go on too long, I should say. But what we're going to do in this one is we're going to go over what leatherworking has to offer for us as crafters. Now, I did a video a day or so ago regarding how the crafting system works, specifically in Dragonflight. So if you want to know about the spec trees and you want to know about profession knowledge and all that sort of stuff, make sure you check that video out. I'll make sure there's a link either, in one of the fancy cards or in the description for that at the very least. But today we're going to take a little bit of a look at leatherworking. I have loaded up with a few materials on this dude. I suppose we should probably take a quick glance at the materials that are going to be sort of relevant to you as a leatherworker. Of course, most of them are going to come from skinning. We have ourselves a basic resilient leather, and there is a dense hide. This seems to be the rare version for leatherwork for the leather. We then have its accompanying scales, adamant scales. Obviously, we've got the quality system in place on these materials as well, and of course, we have lustrous scales as the higher variation of it. So they're your basic leatherworking materials. That's what skinners are going to be out there grinding away to get and probably throwing on the auction house. You can go about getting it however you wish. There is then also these, what we presume to be sort of like rare items that are going to come from mobs as well. These currently do not have the same quality system attached to them, but there's 6 different variations at uncommon quality. Then finally a flawless proto dragon scale at rare. So you'll probably need a handful of these as well. We do not have access to skinning on the alpha as of recording this video, so it's a little bit undetermined, just, the actual true rarity or potential value of these items, but you should be aware of them nonetheless. I want to draw your attention quickly to some materials that you're going to see multiple times highlighted across nearly all of the professions. Artisan's metal, just very quickly, is what we believe to be somewhat of a limited commodity for all crafting professions. You're probably not going to get your hands on too many of these, or at least not very quickly anyway. They are soul-bound, so you are, as a crafter, probably going to be required to go out and do something to get these. What that thing may be, we'll find out as time goes on. And then there's 2 bind-on pickup, presumably raid drop, mythic plus drop items that are going to go into the craft of some of the bigger stuff. All of this will make more sense later on down the lines. The emphasis probably is not going to be on the crafter to actually acquire these, though. These are cannon fodder for one of the materials that is likely to be provided to the crafter through the work order system. The raiders will get this, the PvPers will get this, the mythic pluses will get these doing their activities, and when they have enough of them, they'll be able to put forward that work order. If none of this makes sense to you just yet, don't worry, it will all make sense in a minute. And then finally, we've got the essences or elemental type materials. These are once again commonly used for many of the professions. You'll see these to be a commonplace in the professions, but there's a selection of the rousing ones. You take 10 rousing and you make an awakened, very similar to what we've seen previously. There is some epic versions of these. They don't seem to have much use at the moment, but I picked up a couple of them just because we might need them. So that said, let's get into leatherworking. What does leatherworking actually have offering for us? Well, you pick leatherworking up. You can pick Dragon Isles leatherworking up at level 58. You do not particularly need to be outrageously high levels to pick up leatherworking and to start leveling up and get going. I'm going to give you a bit of a heads up. I've leveled this a few times, so I kind of know the secret path to get to the top pretty quickly. Truth be told, it's actually a very simple, quick and easy process to get your first 50 or so skill points in the profession. You practically have to craft almost nothing, which is kind of weird, right? I'll blast through a very quick early bit of leveling just so that we can unlock specializations. We were going to make some resilient tunics. We make like 15 of these or something. Let's do 14 of those. Actually, ever so slightly disappointed about just how quick it is to get the first 50 points. And then surprised just how grindy it is to get the last 50 points. I'm hoping there might be some slight adjustments, some slight balancing that can be done to, you know, balance that a little bit. It seems very, very easy to begin with, and then the difficulty curve slaps you in the face really fast. When we get to 25 skill points, you unlock your first spec tree. We'll talk about specs in a little bit of detail, as there is there's a couple of the spec trees that look good. There's one that doesn't look quite so good, and there's one that almost becomes mandatory. So there's that meaningful choice is maybe not as much of a meaningful choice as we first expected it to be. At 15 skill points, it's at this point you can learn a couple more recipes, actually. You learn, hang on, not that one. Here we go. Train leatherworking. Learn a few more bits and pieces. I guess whilst we're leveling this up, I can sort of highlight real quickly the kind of stuff we are making. You start off with some very basic, you know, your default leveling gear, I suppose you could state it to be as. The very, very easy to craft stuff. Doesn't require many materials at all. The quantity of materials is all pretty much just one by default for everything at the moment. This is yet to be balanced. Of course, let's not forget this is a very, very early build of the alpha. Under normal circumstances, you'd probably start banging out drums now, but at least when I tried this yesterday, drums were busted. Yeah, drums still don't actually make, so let's just make a bunch of these real quickly to get some skill points on the go. You can see when you're crafting stuff at this point, you really don't care about the quality. You've got nowhere near enough crafting skill to be able to produce anything that's anything like even reasonable. So at the moment, you're just trying to do it as cost effectively as possible. You're just using the cheap basic materials, or what we hope, of course, to be the cheap basic materials. We will find out. We will see. We've hit 25 points, and so at 25 points, you unlock your first specialization. The specs don't act, ironically, they don't particularly matter too much even at this point. You can basically get most of the way to like 40 or 50 points before specs even really make much of a difference. As you can see, drums would still be your choice, your go-to for the purpose of leveling. Just ever so quickly before we jump into the specs itself, to give you a bit of an overview of what we're actually crafting with leatherworking. Leather and mail equivalents of the leveling gear. We have the reintroduction of armor kits, which is nice. There's going to be a couple of weapons we're going to make. For the first time in a long time, we're going to actually be able to make end-game bows, which is quite nice. Shadowlands was really felt odd from a crafting perspective, having no real end-game weapons for any crafters on any profession. It's nice to see that come back. The basic profession equipment that we're going to be able to craft, this is all bind on equip, so this is going to be able to be thrown up on the auction house. There will be the desire to make this at higher quality for sure. This is one of the reasons why you're probably going to want to push your leveling of this as sort of quickly and as efficiently as possible. These bits of gear can go all the way up to tier 5 in terms of quality, and in turn at that point they're going to start offering you a big chunk of the crafting specific stats, so they're going to be quite desirable. They do say in a gold rush you should be selling the shovels, so the profession equipment could end up being very good. Some intermediate reagents, these are just things you're going to have to craft to make the big boy stuff. The likelihood of selling these is probably slim, even though in theory you could. Drums we've spoke about again. There is actually the return of PvP gear. PvP gear seems to be showing its face again, which is nice. This is likely to be the stuff that you end up just crafting in mass and keeping listed on the auction house. Probably crafting 4 or 5 of each different piece, so you get like a good assortment of the different secondary stats on there. You're going to keep that listed, and that's going to be like the bread and butter, I would imagine, for some people from a gold making perspective. There's lots of patterns that you both have to acquire through the specs for endgame gear, and there's also lots of patterns that you are going to have to go out into the world to get. We'll look at those in a little bit more detail in a minute. There is a riding crop, there is a trinket that's coming back, a mount speed increase trinket. Any of you guys been playing Classic in the last couple of years, or anybody that's old school enough to remember when this was an original item in the game, this is making its return. Once again, nice to see this is bind on equip, so another thing that will be cannon fodder for crafting a bunch of and keeping listed and striving to make these at higher quality. In fact, this I think is only, it claims there to be a quality on it, but I don't think there actually is. Some more armor kits that we get to pick up. Armor kits become a staple once again. A couple of toys, a Null 10 to Tuskar beanbag and an artisan sign. A little bit more profession equipment. The profession equipment has 2 tiers. There's the green stuff, the basic stuff you get to learn really early on, and you'll probably master the art of crafting this pretty quickly. But the higher tier profession equipment is going to be a little bit more lucrative. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to craft it at the higher qualities, but of course that's what everybody ultimately will end up wanting on their crafters. We hope the system is fulfilling enough for people to really want to try and min-max it. That'll be nice to see. We make some optional reagents. This is going to give you a few different perks to attach onto different bits of gear. Either yourself or other professions are going to want this. There's a couple of different ones there. The interesting thing to note is that the optional reagents tend to increase the difficulty of the pattern. So if you really are striving to make those top tier quality items, you're going to have to be able to circumvent the extra difficulty that using these adds on. You can do that though. You can see these are adding plus 30 recipe difficulty. Conveniently, you do have finishing reagents, which can often be attached at the same time, which are going to increase your crafting skill conveniently by the same amount. So if you attach one of each on these, they kind of cancel each other out, which is quite nice. We can see some of the weapons that you're going to be able to create as well. The ones that are considered radiant, you can see PH stands for placeholder naming. The radiant gear is basically the crafted gear. It's believed that you're going to be able to equip, I believe, 5 pieces of crafted gear on a single character. But something like a 2-handed bow, for example, actually counts as 2 slots. So you'd only be able to equip 3 other pieces of crafted gear if you had this. So some decisions to be made by people for sure. But let's take a look at the specialization trees then. We've hit, we've reached far enough into it to be able to unlock the spec trees. The leather armor crafting is as you would expect. You specialize in making armor, and the deeper you go down the spec tree, you can then start specializing in certain slots. Chest pieces, helms, shoulder pads, wrist wraps, leg guards, gloves, belts, and boots. Anybody that's dabbled with legendaries at all in Shadowlands will kind of feel a little bit at home with this. Now, you do have to actually get quite deep into the tree before you even get the pattern, the end game pattern. You can see we have to get all the way through to here to unlock the specialization for chest pieces, and then attach a bunch of knowledge to it before we learn the end game chest piece, the end game crafted chest piece for leatherworking. The green lush stained chest piece. This is true to say for all of the armor slots, that you're going to have to delve quite deep into them to unlock the pattern. We can see all the recipes in this list here. So the leather ones, for example, there's a complete set. Green lush stained trousers, shoulder pads, gloves, chest pieces, cap, boots, bindings, and belt. I'm focusing on leather for the purpose of this video, but of course with leatherworking, everything's duplicated, but then for mail as well. This is why leatherworking is one of the only professions that I might actually consider people, you know, double up on. As leatherworking's always felt like having 2 professions in the first place, but considering you're going to have to make that meaningful choice to which one you pick, at least at the beginning, leatherworking is one of the only ones that I might suggest, you know what, take 2 leatherworkers, put leatherworking on an alt as well. Take leatherworking on one, take mail working or mail crafting on the other, and you should be good to go. I'm going to need some leatherworking knowledge real quickly. For the purpose of the alpha, we can cheese the profession knowledge. we've got a fancy little book that just gives us 50 spec points. This is a alpha only, a testing item. This will not be in the final game. We do not at this moment really understand where we're going to get these profession knowledge points from, unfortunately. But I will let you know as soon as we know. So let's grab a few points so we can throw them in the spec tree. I should point out at this point, I've kind of worked out there to be an optimal-ish sort of path. You're going to want to pick either leather or chain. You're going to want to pick leather or mail, whichever one sort of suits you as a character more so. Primordial leatherworking feels as if it still has a lot of work to be done with it. You are very, very likely to take one of these two first. When you hit 50 skill points, you can unlock a second. At that point, you probably want to take leatherworking discipline, as this can give you just flat crafting skill bonuses, and you can throw 30 points in that. And at that point, you are nearly kitted up. If we just, for example, throw a few points in here to simulate a few days, possibly a few weeks of progress. Throw a few points in here, level this up a little bit, get this maxed out, and then unlock chest pieces. By the time we get to this one, we actually get the recipe to make the end game chest piece. Apply those changes. Here we go. Green lush stained chest piece. And this, you can see, is where we start to actually be able to chip away a little bit further down the line. By this point, by 20-30 points into the profession, it starts to slow down really quickly in terms of what, you know, the default stuff is going to give you. We could, in theory, get to about 40, I think it is, from just, you know, some intermediate items, some basic bits and pieces. Let's push that forward. Get this up to 35, 40, something like that. You can see, even these items have gone green at this point. You're really going to rely on unlocking these bits of gear. This, of course, is, as it stands at the moment, the only single orange guaranteed skill point craft we're going to make. So yeah, your first points come really quickly, then it kind of hits a brick wall. But let's talk about this then. If once you have specialized a little bit, once you've unlocked an armor slot and you've got the recipe to make it, you'll very quickly notice that these sparks of ingenuity and these primal chaos kick into gear. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you're likely to expect the people that put the work orders in place to supply these materials. They're bind on pickup. The emphasis shouldn't be on you as a crafter to go out and get these realistically. You're going to supply the expertise in being able to craft in the first place, and you're probably going to supply the basic materials. You can see at this point, we clearly do not have the crafting skill yet to get anywhere near max quality versions of these. Even if you, even if you throw extra bonuses at this, you are still going to find it really difficult to get anywhere near the top. If you use some higher quality materials, you can maybe get to the point where you're making tier 3 versions of these quite quickly. But the tier 4 and tier 5, the absolute best ones of these, it's going to take quite a bit of effort to unlock those. You're going to have to dive much deeper down this, and considering the only way you can work at chipping away these points feels like fulfilling these work orders, you're going to have to really, really hope that there's people out there putting in work orders for the armor piece that you choose to select. This does mean there's a bit of a risk involved. A bit of research might need to be done to try and find out, well, which one is going to be the slot of choice. Because if the work orders don't come in for the piece that you've selected, you're kind of stuck. It's putting a lot of emphasis on the work order system to, you know, function as it should do. Only time will tell just how that actually plays out. But that's pretty much the ins and outs of what leatherworking can kind of offer you. The specialization trees, without going into too much detail, leather and mail feel, I mean, they're carbon copies of each other. You work through the first 2 nodes and then you unlock the specific slots. You know, inspiration has definitely been taken from the legendary crafting system with this, for sure. Primordial leatherworking, gives you the ability to be slightly better at making a few bits and pieces. You know, things like the end game weapons come through the primordial leatherworking. There's a Witherrot tome, which is an offhand piece. Some of the finishing reagents come through here. Primordial leatherworking kind of feels like Blizzard turned around and thought, well, we need another spec for leatherworking. What can it be? And they just kind of threw all of the odds and ends into this one. You know, your armor kits and that sort of stuff. They threw your odds and ends in there just to kind of make an extra spec. So a little bit of work, I think, needs to be done on this one. But at least as it stands at the moment, you're going to either pick leather or you're going to pick mail. And then you're going to hopefully luck out on whichever one you pick first. Now, of course, as time goes on, you'll be able to unlock more, and you'll be able to unlock more, and you'll be able to unlock more of these and put some points in. And by the time you've put 10 points in each one, you'll unlock the pattern for it. And as you can see, you'll start every 10 or 20 points after you've unlocked your first one, you'll start unlocking other patterns. So you should probably be able to get access to a bunch of patterns within hopefully only a couple of weeks. I do hope that they don't time gate all of this too aggressively. But if you can get access to a few pieces, you're going to have to then hunt down those work orders, because if you may notice, these are bind on pickup, so you can't craft them ahead of time and list them on the auction house. You're going to have to rely on the work order system. Hopefully we'll get a good in-depth view in the work order system in due time on the alpha. But yeah, that's basically leatherworking in a nutshell. It doesn't appear to be too complicated and too far from what we expected it to be. The specialization trees feel okay, but I do feel that they could have a little bit of extra work done to them. And I do think they need to maybe balance out the speed in which you gain points. The first few are too easy. The last few are going to be horrendously difficult, because it's going to be nothing but the best of the best work orders to get those final points. I kind of feel sorry for players on smaller servers that just may not ever get the opportunity to even fulfill a work order for the pieces that they choose. But there we go, boys and girls. That's leatherworking. If you enjoy these videos, please let me know in the comments down below. I plan to do a little bit of an overview of each of the different professions, but of course it takes me a bunch of time to dive through it, level it up, work out the ins and outs of it first. So I'll hope to get one of these out to you as and when I can. That's as good of a promise as I can offer to you. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, boys and girls, and subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.